Hey guys, tonight we're stepping gingerly into the murkiest, most misunderstood corner of medieval life. The secret after-hours world of the medieval torturer. That's right. Forget the dungeons, the rack, and the in-laws you only see at Christmas. Tonight, we're asking the questions nobody wanted answers to. What did medieval torturers do for fun after work? When the chains came off and the last heretic clocked out, how did these professional gloom merchants unwind? Was it chess? Was it cheese? Was it, I don't know, competitive whittling? So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, flip on a fan for that nice medieval white noise, and get comfortable. Tuck in those toes. No promises about rats tonight. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered if torturers were just regular people off the clock? Did they host barbecues or lose at medieval bowling? Did they have hobbies, or did they just sit in silence, knitting their next terrifying invention? What happened when they caught the plague? Or worse, a cold? Did they date, or were they just everyone's workplace red flag? And what on earth did they do when they got invited to the village bake sale? Was their bread suspiciously heavy? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up as a medieval torturer. The year is 1389. You have suspicious stains on your shoes, some mysterious animal noises coming from the pantry. And, oh no, a party invitation from your neighbor. Good luck. The day is done. The last confession's been encouraged, and now it's time to clock out, if you had a clock, which you don't. You trudge home past gawking peasants who desperately avoid eye contact. Your boots are caked in mud, hay, and let's call it occupational residue. Do you walk a little faster than necessary? Of course you do. The only thing scarier than your day job is missing the last pie at the bakery. The day is done, the last confession's been encouraged, and now it's time to clock out, if you had a clock, which you don't. You trudge home past gawking peasants who desperately avoid eye contact. Your boots are caked in mud, hay, and let's call it occupational residue. Do you walk a little faster than necessary? Of course you do. The only thing scarier than your day job is missing the last pie at the bakery. You step out into the cobbled twilight, the torches flickering on the walls of the keep behind you. It's always a strange moment. The transition from the cold, echoing stone of the dungeon into the almost too fresh air of the outside world. There's a smell, equal parts chimney smoke, moss, and livestock. You take a deep breath, or at least a half-hearted sniff. It's not exactly the sweet air of freedom, but it's a step up from the heavy tang of old rope and last week's onions that permeates your workplace. Every so often, someone tries to make polite conversation as you pass. A nervous good evening from a farmer with a wheelbarrow, or a child daring to sneak a look before being yanked away by a vigilant parent. You nod back, careful to keep your face as neutral as possible. A little too friendly, and people worry you're planning something. Too stern, and they assume you're bringing work home. The best you can hope for is awkward neutrality. Nobody wants to be remembered as the one who waved at the torturer. Your path home takes you along the edge of the marketplace, where stalls are being packed up for the night. The baker's boy is stacking what's left of the loaves, some of them only a little bit burned, and you eye the last pie like a wolf at a sheep auction. It's always apple, always slightly too tart, always better than another evening of boiled peas. You make a mental note. Pie first, existential dread later. As you walk, you're painfully aware of your boots. Each step makes a soft, sticky squelch. Is it mud? Is it something less legal? Hard to say. You try to avoid the puddles because nothing ruins a night like cold water in your left shoe. But medieval roads are less paved street and more community compost heap with aspirations. Your ankles ache and your calves itch in places you can't reach. At least you're out of the dungeon, you remind yourself. Again, out here, the only screams are from the geese. Passing the blacksmith's forge, you catch the comforting clang of iron on iron, the rhythmic soundtrack of medieval suburbia. The blacksmith's apprentice gives you a stiff nod. He's about your age, but has more teeth, less existential baggage, and a wife who brings him soup. You wonder briefly if he envies you. He probably doesn't, or if he just tells people you're a friend to avoid awkward silences at church. The village dog, a patchy, suspiciously sticky beast named Wart, trots beside you for a few yards before thinking better of it and trotting off to sniff something less controversial. You've never been sure if Wart likes you or just likes the bones you accidentally drop from your lunch, but either way, it's companionship of a sort. By the time you reach your door, the sky has turned the color of old parchment, and the first evening star is winking above the thatched roofs. You pause, looking back over your shoulder at the winding path you've taken, past market stalls, watchful neighbors, and your own swirling reputation. You wonder, just for a moment, what it would be like to stroll home unremarked, to blend into the crowd as just another tired villager with sore feet and pie on the mind. Instead, you set your boots by the door, scrape off as much of the day as will come loose, and step inside. Home. It smells of wood smoke, onions, and a faint whiff of regret. You close the door, and outside, the town finally exhales. Tomorrow, it all begins again. But for tonight, you've made it. One awkward, muddy, apple pie-motivated step at a time. Your cottage is cozy, if your idea of cozy is dark, smoky, and decorated in early plague. Dinner is peasant fare. Hard bread, questionable stew, and cheese that looks like it's plotting something. You eat in silence, the candle flickering, and wonder if you should have washed your hands. You don't. Your cottage is cozy, if your idea of cozy is dark, smoky, and decorated in early plague. Dinner is peasant fare, hard bread, questionable stew, and cheese that looks like it's plotting something. You eat in silence, the candle flickering, and wonder if you should have washed your hands. You don't. You've never been much of a chef, but tonight's meal is, by medieval standards, almost gourmet. There's a stew, mostly onions and root vegetables, with a mysterious chunk of meat that you sincerely hope is mutton and not another failed experiment from the tanner. The bread is the real star of the show, flat, dense, and hard enough to double as emergency self-defense. You consider using it as a coaster, but the bowl is already chipped, and you're running out of dishes. The cottage is quiet except for the crackling of the hearth and the suspicious drip from the thatch above your head. On the mantel sits your single concession to workplace souvenirs. A skull. Not a fresh one, no, you're not a monster, just a professional. It's a gift from your predecessor, painted with faded flowers, and a faintly hopeful motto about memento mori, which is really just medieval for remember to check the expiration date on the cheese. The skull doesn't talk, but in the right candlelight, you could swear it's judging your table manners. Your seating options are limited. A wobbly stool, a bench that lists dangerously to one side, or a pile of old cloaks in the corner that might be moving. You pick the stool because you're feeling brave. You set your bowl down, grab a chunk of cheese, and start your evening ritual, dinner in contemplative, slightly suspicious silence. You break the bread with a satisfying crack. Bits of flour dust drift through the air and settle on the tabletop, mingling with whatever it was you meant to sweep up last month. Medieval eating is a two-handed sport, one to shovel, one to chase off flies. The cheese resists at first, but you manage to carve off a wedge. You hold it up to the light and squint. It squints back. You eat it anyway. The stew is hot, at least around the edges, and only mildly alarming. Somewhere in the mix is a chunk of turnip and something that might once have been a carrot. You fish it out, blow on it, and burn your tongue anyway. You let the next spoonful cool, learning from history in the most literal sense. You listen to the sounds outside, boots in the mud, a distant dog barking, the faint echo of voices drifting from the tavern. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to join them for supper, but you know how it would go. "How was your day?" they'd ask. And you'd hesitate, not sure whether to mention the screaming or the paperwork. Small talk is hard when your job is the medieval equivalent of customer complaint resolution. A moth flutters near the candle. You shoo it away. It comes back. You sigh, deciding that tonight the moth can have a seat at the table too. There's plenty to go around, and you've long since accepted that your home is not your own. It's a small ecosystem of determined insects and questionable produce. You finish your meal, sopping up the last of the stew with a corner of bread that nearly chips a tooth. You look at the skull looks back. For a moment, you feel oddly comforted by the company, even if it's technically not company at all. You think about clearing the dishes, but the hearth is warm and the candle is low. Instead, you rest your elbows on the table and let your thoughts drift. Tomorrow's worries can wait. If you're feeling adventurous, you might even pour yourself a mug of weak ale. Watery, but safe enough that it probably won't kill you, which is all you can really ask for. You raise it in a quiet toast, not just to surviving another day, but to the tiny joys of solitude. To stew that doesn't bite back, bread that doubles as a weapon, and cheese with character. To a home that's yours, flaws and all. To the skull on the mantel, who never interrupts. Eventually, you douse the candle, letting the darkness settle around you. Your belly is full, your mind is calm, and the outside world is kept at bay for a little while longer. There's peace here, in the ordinary rituals and silent company. Not perfect, but enough. And in medieval times, enough is as close to comfort as anyone gets. Even a torturer has to bathe sometimes. The options are limited. Cold rainwater in a barrel, or a hot bath, if you can afford to heat up river water. Scrubbing under the fingernails is less about cleanliness, more about plausible deniability. The town gossip claims torturers never wash. Time to prove them right. You wake one morning and the air in your little cottage is so thick you could butter it on bread. There's a suspicious miasma clinging to your sleeves, and your own socks have begun to revolt. Even the cat gives you a wide berth, which is truly saying something since she regularly licks her own butt. It's time. You've avoided it as long as possible. But medieval hygiene doesn't just call your name. It files a formal complaint. You survey your options. There's the fast and frigid route, a quick splash with whatever's collected in the rain barrel outside. This method guarantees alertness. Nothing wakes you up faster than water cold enough to stun a trout. You brace yourself, dunk a rag, and slap it on your face. Your skin contracts so violently you're pretty sure your eyebrows swap places with your hairline. Somewhere, a distant peasant sneezes, and you take it as a sign to keep going. Alternatively, on rare nights when you have time, fuel, and reckless optimism, you might try to heat a proper bath. This is medieval luxury at its finest. You haul buckets from the river, squint at the firewood you definitely should have gathered last week, and slowly heat water over the hearth. It takes an hour and a half, your back aches, and your dog is now convinced you've invented the world's worst soup. The tub is a battered wooden barrel you inherited from someone who used to pickle eels in it. It leaks. You stuff the cracks with straw and wish for simpler times, like never bathing at all. Soap is an experience. Sometimes you get lucky and snag a lumpy bar from the market, made from animal fat and a hint of rosemary. But mostly it's ashes and hope. Scrubbing with it is less spa day and more self-inflicted exfoliation. You lather up, if you can call it that, and try to forget that everyone in the village already has an opinion about your cleanliness, or lack thereof. Bathing is a production, and privacy is an illusion. If you're outside, a neighbor will inevitably wander past with a cart full of turnips and a stare that lasts a little too long. If you're inside, the cottage fills with steam, windows fog up, and the smell of wet wool drifts across your only blanket. You get halfway through and realize the water is already murky. You try not to think about it. Maybe it was always brown. Maybe you're cleaner now. Maybe this is just a medieval vibe. You make a special effort on your hands, scrubbing each finger as if erasing the memory of the workday. It's not about guilt. Well, maybe a little. It's about plausible deniability. If anyone asks, your fingernails are clean. You are just a humble, hard-working villager who happens to have access to more soap than average. Nothing to see here. Rinsing is a process you endure, not enjoy. There's always a draft, and the water never stays warm long enough. You catch sight of yourself in a warped bit of polished metal and decide you look well, less haunted than before, cleaner, at least by local standards. There are always those who claim that torturers never bathe. It's easier to believe in monsters if they're dirty. You wonder if you should encourage the rumors. Maybe there's a certain safety in being the village's least huggable citizen. But deep down, you know that nobody wants to go to bed with feet that feel like they've been brining in dungeon juice. You dry off with a towel that used to be a tunic, put on your least stiff shirt, and step outside for a moment. The night air feels soft against clean skin. A rare, fleeting luxury. The cat approaches, gives you a single approving nod, and curls up by your feet. You almost feel human again. Bathing away the day's grime doesn't erase who you are, but it's a start. It's a small rebellion against the darkness, the rumors, and the stains you can't quite scrub away. You inhale the fresh night and realize, for a few hours at least, you're not just the torturer, you're just another villager, clean enough to sleep and maybe even dream. Courting as a torturer is challenging. Your reputation precedes you, usually by about 20 terrified feet. You try your best at the village festival, but somehow I work with my hands doesn't get the laughs you'd hoped for. Dating apps won't be invented for 600 years, so you settle for passive-aggressive glances across the market. It isn't that you're opposed to romance. Far from it. Somewhere beneath the leather apron and the dungeon dust, your heart beats as hopefully as anyone's. But medieval dating is already a labyrinth of misunderstandings, livestock, and mysterious stains. Add professional torturer to your resume, and you've just upgraded to hard mode. You'd like to blame your job, but honestly, your job does most of the talking for you. Word gets around. You spend more time than you'd admit practicing small talk in your head. What would you even say if someone gave you a chance? Lovely weather for beheading, isn't it? You look radiant in this torchlight, like someone who's never seen an oubliette up close. The words stick. You sigh and try again. Maybe just, hello. Even that comes out sounding ominous, like a curse disguised as a greeting. At the market, you sometimes catch the eye of the baker's daughter. She's always polite, but she hands you your bread with the nervousness of someone offering raw meat to a bear. Nice loaf, you say, then instantly regret it. She nods, slowly, her smile frozen in place, already backing toward the cheese stall. If there's ever a prize for most unsettling compliment, you'll be a shoo-in. You're not without admirers. Once, a local widow sent you a basket of apples. She tucked in a note that said, "For your health," followed by a sentence that looked suspiciously like a veiled threat. You appreciated the effort, though you washed the apples 3 times before eating one, just in case. Trust issues aren't just for romance, they're for survival. The annual festival is the closest thing the village has to speed dating, only with more mud and fewer expectations. You arrive early, hoping to blend in, but everyone knows exactly who you are. You join a group dancing around a bonfire, careful not to step on any toes, literally or metaphorically. The fiddler grins nervously every time you get too close to the music. When the time comes to bob for apples, nobody seems eager to take a turn after you. You have a strong grip, says the miller's wife. You thank her, then spend the rest of the night wondering if it was a compliment or a warning. If you manage to strike up a real conversation, there's always the job question. What do you do? It's hard to answer honestly. I work in corrections might be technically true, but the last time you tried that, the other person didn't stop running until sunrise. You consider lying, maybe you're a gardener or a traveling puppeteer, but sooner or later, someone's going to recognize your face from the official town announcements nailed up by the church. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to court someone without the baggage, to offer a flower and not have it mistaken for a veiled threat, to share a picnic in the meadow and not have everyone else sitting at a respectful distance, inventing errands on the far side of the village. In these daydreams, you're not the torturer. You're just a person, awkward and hopeful, trying to make a connection over slightly stale bread. Of course, it's not all disappointment. Every now and then, someone surprises you. A wink from the candlemaker, a friendly wave from the tanner's apprentice, an offer to split a tart at the midsummer feast. It's never much, but in the medieval world, romance is a series of small risks and smaller rewards. You take what you can get. At night, you wonder if things will ever change. If, one day, you'll find someone who sees past your reputation, who listens instead of flinching, who laughs at your jokes, or at least doesn't run away. For now, you settle for the quiet comfort of company, your cat curled at your feet, the steady hum of village life outside, and the faint hope that even a torturer can find love. In a hopeless, hilarious place, you enter the tavern. Everyone pretends not to notice. Your regular seat is always available, right next to the fireplace, alone, where the dog refuses to sit. The bartender pours your ale with impressive speed and minimal eye contact. You raise a toast, silently, to professional alienation. You enter the tavern. Everyone pretends not to notice. Your regular seat is always available, right next to the fireplace, alone, where the dog refuses to sit. The bartender pours your ale with impressive speed and minimal eye contact. You raise a toast, silently, to professional alienation. The tavern, at first glance, is the closest thing your village has to a community center, part gathering place, part rumor mill, part experimental chemistry lab for local brewers. The air is thick with wood smoke, spilled ale, and the hearty aroma of something that may once have been soup. Every table is occupied. Farmers hunched over tankards, merchants with their dice and coins, couples sharing secrets in low voices. But somehow, there's always room for you, and only you, on your lonely bench near the fire. It's not personal, you tell yourself. It's just business. Nobody wants to sit too close to the torturer. You get it. You really do. Still, sometimes you wonder what it would be like to enter a room and spark lively conversation instead of clearing a 3-foot radius. The only one who seems to appreciate your presence is the dog, a ragged, one-eyed mutt who will occasionally wander over, sniff your boots, and decide he has better places to be. You can't blame him. He's got standards. Your first sip of ale is always the best, mostly because it dulls the lingering scent of turnip stew from dinner. The brew is weak, almost watery, but it's cold and, more importantly, safer than water straight from the well. You look into the fire, pretending to be deep in thought. Really, you're just waiting for the room to stop noticing you exist. At the bar, the regulars are locked in their nightly debates. Who's to blame for the latest livestock disappearance? Is it wolves, witches, or the miller's uncanny talent for sleepwalking? Who knows? The stories change with every refill. You listen in quietly, blending into the background noise like a living piece of furniture. Every now and then, someone tries to make awkward small talk. The blacksmith, after one too many ales, gives you a nod and mumbles something about the weather. You nod back, careful not to reveal too much. Rain tomorrow, you say, whether you believe it or not. The safest prediction in the Middle Ages is always more rain. You try to join in the tavern games. Dice, sometimes. A round of bones if you're feeling brave. But your presence has an uncanny effect. Whenever you pick up the dice, everyone else suddenly remembers urgent business in the alleyway. The one time you win a hand, you try to celebrate, but the room grows so quiet you can hear the dog licking his paw across the hearth. You push the coins back across the table. Just luck, you mutter, and the game resumes only when you pretend to fall asleep. Despite it all, you're a loyal customer. The bartender knows your drink, your silence, and your habit of tipping generously for no reason other than the hope of earning a half-hearted smile. Sometimes, he gives you an extra crust of bread or slips you the last bit of cheese before closing up. These little kindnesses mean more than you'd admit. As the evening wears on, the fire settles into a soft orange glow. The talk gets softer. Someone starts up a song, a slow, mournful tune about lost goats and love affairs gone sideways. You hum along under your breath, careful not to draw attention. You might not be welcome at most tables, but here, in the dim light and the gentle haze of ale, you feel almost invisible. It's a rare comfort. By midnight, the tavern empties out. Farmers stumble home. Merchants gather their winnings, and the bartender sweeps up another day's worth of sawdust and secrets. You linger a while, staring at the embers, letting the warmth seep into your bones. For a few minutes, you aren't the village menace or the workplace pariah. You're just another tired soul, savoring the last sips of company. Eventually, you stand, thank the bartender with a nod, and slip into the cool night. The village is quiet, shadows pooling in doorways. The tavern light a small beacon behind you. You walk home alone, but the memory of the fire's warmth stays with you. A flicker of belonging in a world where most doors remain closed. A round of throw, the chicken bone is underway. Nobody asks if you want to join. You play anyway, setting a new record for bone distance. Strangely, nobody cheers. You try darts, but the target is a little too familiar for everyone's taste. You'd think that after hours of awkward silence and careful tiptoeing around your reputation, the tavern would become an oasis of relaxation. A place where everyone leaves their titles and odd jobs at the door. But medieval life doesn't work that way. Every villager brings their history inside with them, like mud on their boots, and, in your case, a vague whiff of dungeon. Still, games are the great equalizer, or so you tell yourself. The first sign that a game is about to start is a sudden clearing of the largest table. Mugs hastily collected, and a pile of odds and ends dumped in the center. Bones, pebbles, a battered wooden cup, and what looks suspiciously like a chicken foot. Throw the chicken bone is a local classic, requiring equal parts luck, questionable judgment, and an ability to ignore the sticky spot on the table left by last week's cider disaster. It's a simple game. You toss a chicken bone at a target, usually an old plate or a chalk circle on the floor. Closest to the center wins. Everyone gathers around, laughing, jostling for position, and glancing at you with the cautious optimism of people who've just realized the torturer is in the room and might want to play. Eventually, after a lot of polite hesitation and unnecessary throat clearing, you're handed a bone. It's smaller than you'd like, but you grip it with the seriousness of someone about to change the course of history. You throw. The bone arcs, lands squarely in the middle of the circle, and skids to a stop with satisfying precision. For a split second, you expect applause. Instead, there's a silence so dense you could spread it on bread. Then, as if on cue, everyone decides they're suddenly very interested in a different game. Darts, someone announces, with forced cheer. The dartboard, to your discomfort, looks suspiciously like a faded drawing of a local baron, one you may have met in less festive circumstances. You try to join in, but when your first dart lands with a little too much enthusiasm, the rest of the players quietly agree to switch to cards. You can't blame them. Nobody wants to see what happens when the torturer wins at darts. You move to the back table and find yourself watching a tense game of dice. The rules change every few minutes, depending on who's winning, but nobody seems to mind. Snake eyes. The miller shouts, and everyone groans. You ask if you can play, and, after a brief pause where everyone tries to remember if dice are considered an instrument of torture, they hand you the cup. You give it a gentle shake and roll 2 4s. Nobody cheers, but at least nobody runs for the door. Then there's the game of knuckle bones. A bit like jacks, but more hazardous for your fingers and pride. You're actually good at this one. Your hands practiced from years of delicate, if questionable work. You flick the bones into the air and catch them neatly, earning a few raised eyebrows and one slightly impressed. For a moment, you almost feel like part of the group. Throughout the night, the games shift and blend, old favorites giving way to new inventions. The rules getting hazier as the ale flows. Somebody suggests blind man's bluff. You decline. The last thing anyone wants is the torturer stumbling around in the dark, even as a joke. By the end of the evening, you've lost more games than you've won. Your pockets lighter from a handful of friendly wagers. But there's a comfort in the rhythm of it all. The laughter, the competitive banter, the shared disappointment when the bar dog eats the winning chicken bone. Nobody says it aloud. But the act of playing together, even badly, makes the tavern a little warmer, a little less lonely. You may never be the life of the party, but you're not entirely on the outside either. Games are games, no matter who wins. And as you leave, the others give you a polite nod, a small sign that, for tonight at least, you're just another player. You step into the cool night air, pockets empty, heart a little fuller, and wonder what game you'll lose tomorrow. In the end, it doesn't matter. In the Middle Ages, sometimes just being asked to play is enough. Off the clock, you're actually quite crafty. Whittling is soothing, embroidery is meditative, and you've started collecting rare spoons. You briefly consider taking up knitting, but the needles raise too many uncomfortable questions. For all the notoriety that comes with your day job, your evenings are surprisingly gentle. The moment the cottage door closes behind you and the world's last whispers fade, you set about your nightly rituals. Your hands, so feared at work, are delicate and precise here, whittling a twig into the suggestion of a bird or tracing lazy stitches through a scrap of linen. It's your own little rebellion against reputation, creating instead of undoing, shaping instead of shattering. Whittling is your first love. The soft rasp of knife against wood is hypnotic. You sit by the flickering fire and let the hours slip away, shaving curls off hazel branches, coaxing faces from beech knots. Sometimes you make animals, clumsy dogs, winking cats, the occasional lopsided duck. Other times, you whittle puzzle pieces for the neighbor's children. Of course, you never sign your work. If anyone asks where the toys came from, the parents just smile awkwardly and suggest they must be gifts from the spirits. It's fine. Let the rumor mill have its fun. You prefer anonymity anyway. Embroidery came later. At first, you mended your own shirts because nobody else would. Missing buttons and torn cuffs aren't high on the local tailor's list of priorities for torturers. But the act became strangely addictive. There's a quiet peace in pulling colored thread through coarse linen, watching patterns bloom like secret gardens on otherwise drab cloth. Lately, you've started experimenting with designs, vines, stars, even little animals that look suspiciously like the ones you whittle. There's a certain pride in knowing the inside of your collar has more personality than the outside. Collecting rare spoons started as a joke. You found an oddly shaped one behind the bakery, a flattened, twisted thing, probably dropped and run over by a cart. It made you laugh, and you took it home. Now you have a small collection, a wooden spoon with a hole in the middle, a blackened silver one, probably lead if you're honest, and one with a handle carved like a serpent. They sit in a cup on your shelf, clinking together whenever the wind rattles the shutters. You've never told anyone about them. If people knew you spent your evenings rearranging spoons by vibe, you'd be even more of a local legend. You've thought about knitting. Wool is warm and the process looks soothing, but after years of carrying sharp objects, you realize there's only so much you can get away with. Besides, the local gossip is already convinced you knit ominous warning banners for your victims. Let them wonder. You're content with your safer hobbies. Occasionally, you try your hand at other crafts. You once attempted basket weaving, but it ended badly for both you and the basket. You tried painting too, but ran out of patience and colors after your third attempt at still life with cheese. The cheese didn't cooperate. You've learned to stick to what soothes you, quiet things, repetitive things, projects you can set aside when the mood darkens and return to later. Picking up the thread, the knife, or the odd spoon, you keep your creations tucked away in corners. Tiny tokens of normalcy. Proof that even someone with your reputation can make beauty in the small spaces between duty and sleep. They fill your shelves, decorate your table, and occasionally travel out into the world disguised as anonymous gifts. In a village where most people expect you to sow only fear, you find it quietly hilarious to be the secret source of carved rabbits and embroidered wildflowers. At the end of the evening, your hands are stained with wood dust and wool fluff instead of soot and worry. There's a peace that comes from crafting, from shaping the world into something harmless, silly, or even sweet. It doesn't erase your day job, but it balances it a little. And as you set down your latest creation, you realize you've built yourself a kind of sanctuary. 4 walls, a warm fire, and a table full of quiet, harmless things. In the Middle Ages, hobbies are more than distractions. They're defiance. Proof that even the most misunderstood souls can make something gentle, simply for the sake of making. And as you curl up beside your half-finished whittled menagerie and sleep comes, you remember there's more to you than what the world sees. There's always a softer story, if you know where to look. Family life is complicated. If you have kids, their bring your parent to work day is permanently cancelled. You help with homework, which is mostly reading and how not to get accused of witchcraft. Every bedtime story ends with, and that's why we don't talk to strangers. If anyone ever imagined the life of a medieval torturer as solitary, they never considered the chaos of home. Children, if you have them, are a particular sort of challenge, equal parts joy, bewilderment, and opportunity for loud public embarrassment. They don't care about your reputation, except when it means their friends won't come over after school, which in medieval times just means they have to play in the street with the neighbor's goat instead. Home is a jumble of chores, spilled pottage, and constant negotiation over who's feeding the chickens. You try to enforce some sense of discipline, but your job means that any threat you make, if you don't tidy your shoes, you'll find out what real torture is met with eye rolls and giggles. Children, it turns out, have a remarkable ability to see through your act. Your sternest work voice earns nothing but mockery, and your best attempts at looking scary are immediately undercut by the flour smudge on your nose or the sock hanging off your belt. Homework is its own medieval ordeal. The local priest drops off wax tablets covered in questionable Latin, expecting miracles. Mostly, it's a battle to keep your children from doodling tiny gallows and stick-figure peasants in the margins. You encourage reading, gently, since books are rare and precious. When your child laboriously copies the alphabet on a scrap of parchment, you beam with pride. Then gently erase the part where they wrote, "My dad makes grown-ups cry." Bedtime in a torturer's house is a unique ritual. You tell stories, of course, nothing too scary. You get enough of that at work. But you're no expert on fairy tales either. You improvise. There's always a wicked ogre, a clever peasant, and a moral that somehow circles back to never trust anyone who wants to see your teeth. The children request favorites. Tell the one about the duck who outwitted the castle guard. You oblige, making the duck a little braver each time. Eventually, you tuck them in, listen for one last round of questions. Is the dungeon really cold? Can I have a pony? Do monsters eat turnips? And promise, once again, that the only thing under their bed is dust and one angry beetle. Raising children in the Middle Ages is less about helicopter parenting and more about crowd control. Every day, you patch tunics, mediate disputes, and issue vague, well-intentioned threats about bedtime that nobody takes seriously. If your partner is in the picture, you share a knowing glance across the dinner table. Solidarity in the trenches. If not, well, you make do, juggling chores and discipline and the lingering question of whether you're raising future upstanding villagers or very small, very opinionated revolutionaries. Family outings are, predictably, a mess. Market days mean dragging your children past the tempting piles of sticky buns, convincing them not to throw turnips at the town crier, and steering clear of any public spectacle involving livestock or the pillory. Don't touch that, you say, for the 100th time, as your youngest attempts to climb into a barrel of pickles. That's how you get medieval tetanus. Even discipline is fraught. You're keenly aware of how your authority looks to others. A stern look in the dungeon means business. A stern look at home means, at best, a sheepish apology and a missing cookie. Still, your kids test boundaries with the kind of boldness only the young, and entirely unafraid, possess. You try to teach them kindness, cleverness, and the value of not eating wild mushrooms. For all the chaos, there's warmth. You watch your children chase each other around the cottage, hear their laughter ring through the garden, and realize that for all your grim reputation, you've managed to create a small, noisy, ordinary kind of happiness. In these moments, your job fades into the background. You are not the torturer. You're just a parent, tired, hopeful, and desperately trying to keep everyone's feet clean for 5 minutes. By night's end, when the house is quiet and your children are finally asleep, or pretending to be, you sit by the fire and reflect. You wonder what kind of world you're leaving for them. You hope it's one with fewer dungeons, more stories, and better bread. Maybe, just maybe, they'll remember you not for your work, but for the way you made them laugh, the stories you spun, and the peace you found together in the flickering light of home. Every torturer needs a companion. You have a mangy cat, a 3-legged dog, and a raven that definitely knows too much. The cat judges you, the dog avoids the basement, and the raven keeps trying to imitate screams. Cute. For all the grumbling about your job, nothing softens a medieval reputation quite like a pet or two, or 3, if you're unlucky enough to have made eye contact with a raven at the wrong moment. You never really set out to collect animals. They just seem to find you, the way strange rumors and unwanted turnips do. It's an unspoken law of the village. Even the darkest cottage has its share of fleas and muddy paw prints. The cat came first. She showed up one foggy morning, battered and suspicious, and decided to move in without permission. You tried to shoo her away, but she curled up on your best blanket and stared at you until you gave in. She answers to no name, but you call her madam on formal occasions and you little menace the rest of the time. Her hobbies include hunting mice, ignoring you, and judging your life choices from the highest shelf in the cottage. Some evenings, you'd swear she's keeping a tally of your mistakes. Still, her company is comforting, a warm, purring presence that somehow makes even the gloomiest evenings feel less haunted. Then there's the dog. Wart, so named for the bumpy patch on his nose, arrived with 3 working legs and a heart big enough for 2 villages. Nobody knows where he came from, but he has a way of showing up when you least expect him, limping gamely alongside children, defending the chicken coop from imaginary threats, or sleeping soundly in front of the hearth. He's terrified of the basement and will go out of his way to avoid even looking at the door. You suspect he's picked up on some of the darker energies of your profession, or maybe he just remembers a time when he had all 4 legs. Still, Wart greets you every day with the kind of devotion that only a dog, or perhaps a medieval peasant, can muster. Unblinking loyalty, muddy paw prints, and occasional gifts of things you wish you hadn't seen. And then there's the raven. You never asked for a raven. It simply arrived one autumn afternoon, perched atop the garden fence, eyeing you with unsettling intelligence. You fed it scraps, and now you have a permanent roommate with wings. It's more than a pet, it's an opinionated shadow, watching everything you do and occasionally imitating sounds it really shouldn't know. Screams, for instance. Or the creak of the dungeon door. Or, disturbingly, the sound of your own voice muttering to yourself when you think you're alone. Some villagers say ravens are a sign of ill omen. Others think they're lucky. You've learned to accept that your raven is just part of the scenery, never fully tamed, never quite leaving, always present when you least expect it. Pet ownership in medieval times is never simple. Food is scarce, so your animals learn to make do. Cats hunt, dogs scavenge, and the raven is a shameless thief with a taste for anything shiny. You do your best to share what you have, even if it means splitting your dinner with 3 creatures who, combined, have more secrets than the castle's steward. Bath time is a farce. The dog hides under the bed. The cat disappears entirely, and the raven supervises from the rafters, croaking what you can only assume is encouragement, or mocking laughter. Yet, despite the chaos, your pets make the cottage a home. They keep you grounded, remind you to laugh, and provide endless opportunities for small acts of kindness. An extra scrap for the cat, a gentle scratch behind Wart's ears, a shiny button left for the raven to discover. They don't care about your job, your reputation, or the stories whispered behind your back. They care that you come home, that you share your warmth and your leftovers, and that you remember to leave the window open just enough for a quick escape. At the end of a long day, you settle into your favorite chair, surrounded by the ragtag menagerie you never asked for and would never give up. The cat purrs at your feet. The dog sighs contentedly in his sleep, and the raven watches from above, head cocked, waiting for your next move. In a world full of suspicion and shadows, your pets offer unconditional acceptance, along with a little bit of chaos and a lot of fur. And as you drift off to sleep, you realize that, in their own way, your unlikely companions are the best defense you have against loneliness, and maybe the best proof that there's still a little light and even a little love in your life after all. Time for chores. You sweep, you patch the thatch, you try to ignore the suspicious stains on your front step. The neighbor's goat keeps escaping into your herb garden, which is probably the most dangerous thing it does all day. Housework, in theory, should be a soothing routine, something to mark the hours between dinner and sleep. In practice, it's a medieval endurance test peppered with minor disasters, animal interference, and a never-ending supply of mysterious new stains. Your cottage is only a handful of paces from end to end, but somehow it accumulates more dirt, debris, and debris-like objects than a whole village fairground after a rainstorm. You start with sweeping. The broom is handmade, mostly twigs, tied with hope. It leaves more twigs than it collects. And every sweep just seems to rearrange the dust into new, slightly more artistic patterns. You eye a particularly stubborn patch of mud by the door and decide it gives the room character. The cat watches your efforts with deep skepticism from atop the cupboard, tail flicking, as if to say, "Why bother?" You don't have an answer. You just keep sweeping. Next up, patching the thatch. The roof is a living thing, held together by wishful thinking and the occasional patch of moss. There's a leak over the bed, which you've been meaning to fix since last autumn. You clamber up a rickety ladder, straw bundle in hand, praying the wind doesn't catch you mid-climb. Every step creaks with ancient secrets. And the raven, always keen for drama, caws loudly from the fence, as if auditioning for a storm. You stuff a bit more straw into the leaky spot, pat it down, and call it good enough. In the medieval world, good enough is the gold standard. Of course, the neighbor's goat is a constant companion. No matter how many times you repair the fence, she finds her way in, trampling your mint and sampling your onions. You chase her out with a half-hearted scolding, but she just stares back, chewing thoughtfully, clearly unimpressed. You try to bribe her with an old carrot, hoping to appeal to her better nature. She takes the carrot, then knocks over your water bucket in a parting gesture of disdain. You consider writing a strongly worded note to your neighbor, but settle for muttering creative curses under your breath. Indoors, you tackle the stains. There's the odd splash by the hearth, possibly stew, possibly something else, possibly best left unidentified. The mysterious spot on the table gets another wipe with a damp cloth, which immediately becomes part of the problem. You make a half-hearted attempt at organizing your collection of spoons, wooden toys, and half-embroidered handkerchiefs, but eventually accept that medieval tidiness is an illusion. The cat promptly knocks everything off the shelf for good measure. Laundry is a task best ignored, but eventually you can't. You haul your worn tunic and socks to the stream, scrubbing them against a rock with lumpy soap. Your hands freeze, your back aches, and your tunic returns only slightly cleaner, now scented faintly with river and regret. You hang it to dry on a line strung between two hopeful sticks. The raven steals a sock as you turn your back. You let him have it. He's earned it. Even meal prep becomes a chore. You chop onions, eyes streaming, wondering if this is the real reason medieval people believed in curses. You stir a pot of pottage that's been reheated more times than you can count, adding whatever's left in the pantry, a handful of wilted greens, a questionable egg, and some dried herbs from the windowsill. Wart the dog sits at your feet, offering moral support and a pair of very hopeful eyes. Finally, you sit and take in the results. The cottage is marginally cleaner. The roof still leaks, your socks are missing, and the goat has returned for another round. You sigh, but a small part of you feels satisfied. Chores may never be finished, but they're proof of life, a way of marking time, of shaping your own tiny patch of the world, one muddy footprint at a time. As night falls and the animals settle, you curl up by the fire, sore and a little proud. The house is still standing, more or less. Tomorrow the stains and the goat will return, as always. But tonight, you've done enough. And in the Middle Ages, that's really all anyone can ask. Staying in shape is part of the job. You chop wood, haul water, and occasionally chase the chickens for cardio. Every so often you do push-ups, which in medieval terms means falling down and getting up again. Gym membership, 0. Back pain, infinite. You'd think that working in a dungeon would provide all the physical activity a person could need. After all, there's a fair amount of heavy lifting, pulling, and the occasional sprint after an unruly rat. But even in medieval times, Everyone needs a little something extra to stay limber, especially if you'd rather not be outpaced by the village gravedigger in the next tug of war. Your fitness equipment is whatever you can find. The firewood pile becomes your dumbbell rack. Chopping logs is a full-body workout, guaranteed to keep your arms strong and your back mostly functional. Each swing of the axe is accompanied by a satisfying thud, and occasionally by a sharp yelp when you realize you've hit your own foot. You mutter something about dynamic stretching and keep going. No one ever said medieval fitness was painless. Hauling water is another daily routine. The well is a quarter-mile away, uphill both ways, naturally, and your bucket leaks just enough to make you question the point of the exercise. Every trip is a test of endurance, balance, and your ability to ignore damp socks. The upside, excellent biceps. The downside, wet feet, sore shoulders, and the eternal hope that someday someone will invent indoor plumbing. Chasing chickens isn't officially part of any exercise regimen, but it happens more often than you'd like to admit. The chickens in your yard are escape artists, and every morning, at least one manages to wedge itself under the fence and disappear into the undergrowth. You try not to take it personally, but there's nothing quite like sprinting after a flapping blur of feathers at sunrise to get your heart rate up. It's all very invigorating, if also a little undignified. You remind yourself that cardio is good for the soul, if not the ego. Every so often, you attempt something resembling medieval push-ups. The floor of your cottage is uneven, so you pick the flattest patch and drop to the ground. Your cat watches, unimpressed, as you grunt your way through a handful of reps. The dog offers moral support by licking your ear at the worst possible moment, causing you to collapse in a heap. Still, you get up and try again. That's really all any fitness instructor can ask. Stretching is important, though medieval stretching looks a lot like just trying to reach that thing on the top shelf. You twist, bend, and occasionally groan as your knees remind you that you're no longer 20. You try to remember what the village healer said about staying limber, something about willow bark and not overdoing it. You ignore the advice, naturally. Pride comes before the limp. Sometimes you think about starting a medieval exercise class. You'd call it plague Pilates or dungeon yoga. Gentle stretching with extra prayers for joint relief. Attendance would be low, but you'd have the market cornered on unique branding. For now, your only students are the pets, who remain determinedly sedentary no matter how many times you demonstrate proper technique. By the end of the day, you're exhausted in that special medieval way. Muscles sore, joints creaky, but at least confident that if fitness ever becomes a village trend, you'll be ahead of the curve. You slump by the fire, stretch out your legs, and make a mental note to invent the hot tub next year. Your work clothes are functional. Off-duty, you change into your second-best tunic, slightly less stained. Your shoes squeak, your belt creaks, and nobody asks about the mysterious apron you always hang to dry. Style is subjective. When it comes to fashion, you're not exactly the talk of the town, unless the topic is most suspicious stains of the season. Your work attire is a patchwork of heavy linen, battered leather, and enough accidental color variations to make even the village painter weep. It's practical, thick enough to keep the cold out, thin enough to run in if you need to make a fast exit, and sturdy enough to double as a blanket or, in emergencies, a tablecloth. Let's start with your uniform. The centerpiece is a long tunic, dyed a color that may once have been brown, but is now somewhere between mud and existential dread. You tried to wash it once, but it only made the stains more mysterious. The apron is leather, cracked and soft, with odd marks that nobody asks about. You hang it outside on wash days, and even the birds give it a wide berth. The sleeves of your tunic are rolled up, partly to show you mean business, partly because medieval buttons are expensive, and mostly because the cuffs are permanently fused to your wrists with ancient soup and candle wax. Your boots are the definition of broken in. They squeak with every step, a kind of medieval soundtrack that warns people you're coming whether you want it or not. You tried oiling them once, but the result was simply more squeak, plus a faint aroma of questionable bacon. There's a hole in the left toe, which you've patched with string, hope, and the optimistic belief that winter won't come early this year. On your days off, such as they are, you treat yourself to your casual wardrobe. This consists of your next least worn tunic, which is only slightly less itchy and just as unevenly dyed. The color is old hay. The cut is whatever fit when you last bartered for cloth. No matter what you wear, there's a permanent air of cautious utility. Your belt is a thick strip of leather, handed down from someone whose waistline was clearly more optimistic. You use it to carry keys, a small knife, and occasionally a turnip, just in case. Accessories are limited. You own a hat, but it's more of a statement piece. Floppy, wide-brimmed, and best used for hiding in crowds or keeping rain off your face. The local tailor once offered you a scarf, but you suspect it was just a clever way to sell leftovers. Jewelry? Out of the question. Not only would it get in the way at work, but it would also make you look suspiciously successful, a surefire way to draw unwanted attention from the tax collector or, worse, the village gossip. Still, there's something comforting about the predictability of your wardrobe. You know every patch, every threadbare seam, every spot that never quite came clean. When you see someone else in the tavern with a similar smudge or a familiar repair, there's a silent nod of camaraderie. In a world where clothes are precious, every rip and patch tells a story. And so, each morning you dress with care. Layer by layer, belt by squeaky belt. You tuck your apron away, slip into your boots, and adjust your hat just so. It's not stylish, it's not elegant, but it's you. Practical, unremarkable, and perfectly equipped for a world where fashion is survival and a clean shirt is a luxury best saved for feast days and funerals. The town market is abuzz with rumors, mostly about you. You lean in, pretending to examine turnips, while overhearing wild stories about what you get up to at night. You contemplate starting a rumor about your amazing bread, just to balance things out. Gossip is the lifeblood of any medieval village, and market day is when it flows thickest. The air is filled with the shouts of merchants, the bleating of goats, and the steady undercurrent of speculation, half-truths, and outright fantasy. You arrive just after sunrise, blending in with the early risers, basket in hand, and a practiced look of disinterest on your face. You nod to the baker, ignore the fishmonger's pointed stare, and make a show of squeezing onions with an expertise that suggests you're here for business, not for sport. But you're not fooling anyone. No matter how quietly you walk, the whispers begin before you even reach the cheese stall. There he is. Someone mutters, as if you can't hear them from 3 feet away. Did you hear what he did to the miller's nephew? Another voice asks. A little too loud. You consider turning around and introducing yourself as local misfortune consultant, but decide against it. This is a village that prefers its mysteries unsolved. You wander between stalls, letting the rumors wash over you. Some are classics. He sleeps upside down like a bat. Others are refreshingly inventive. Saw him talking to the bishop's horse last Tuesday. Both of them nodded. You pause at the herbalist's booth, pretending to admire her sage bundles. He collects bones from the river. Someone whispers. Makes soup out of them. The herbalist winks at you. You wink back. It's an unspoken agreement. She'll keep your secrets if you keep hers. Children giggle as you pass, daring each other to touch the hem of your tunic. One brave soul manages to brush your sleeve, then sprints away screaming, as if you might turn into a toad at any moment. You smile behind your hand. There's a strange sort of freedom in being the village bogeyman. You can move through crowds, cut in line, and never have to explain yourself when you buy extra onions for a friend. The best rumors are always the most outlandish. This week, you've supposedly been seen dancing in the moonlight, practicing witchcraft, and growing turnips that can scream. The truth is far more mundane. Your only late-night ritual is sweeping crumbs off the table, and the only thing your turnips do is rot quietly in the ground. Still, you let the stories grow. Why spoil a good legend with reality? As you eavesdrop, you consider starting a rumor of your own. Maybe something flattering. Did you know he bakes the best bread in the county? Or maybe something practical. I hear he's looking for someone to help with his garden. But you know how rumors work. Once released, they take on a life of their own, mutating into tales involving dragons, stolen cows, and possibly royalty. It's safer to let sleeping gossip lie. By midday, you've collected your bread, a wedge of cheese, and enough fresh material for a year's worth of idle speculation. You make your way home, pausing only to smile at the old woman selling honey cakes. She nods knowingly, as if she's privy to your darkest secrets, which, if you're honest, mostly involve a mild addiction to honey cakes. Back at your cottage, you reflect on the morning's entertainment. For all the headaches, gossip is a kind of shield. It keeps people at arm's length. It turns you into a story, something larger and stranger than life. And as you bite into your bread and hear the distant laughter of children spinning the latest tale, you can't help but feel a little proud. In the end, there are worse things than being a legend, especially if it means nobody asks too many real questions. Invited to the bake sale, you bring a pie. Nobody tries it. You're asked politely if it contains extra ingredients. You tell them, just apples. Nobody believes you. But at least you get to take your pie home. In theory, the village bake sale is a wholesome affair, a chance for neighbors to swap recipes, show off their flakiest crusts, and sample each other's mysterious concoctions without fear. In practice, it's an awkward game of medieval trust exercises, where every tart and biscuit is eyed with equal parts hunger and suspicion. Your presence doesn't help. When the torturer arrives at the bake sale, even the gingerbread men look nervous. The event is held in the churchyard, with rickety tables covered in linen cloths, each one sagging under the weight of homemade loaves, hand pies, and whatever someone managed to bake without burning. The whole village is there. Old men with jam on their beards, children sticky with honey, and the priest, who hovers like a benevolent judge over the proceedings. You arrive a bit late, pie in hand, doing your best to look non-threatening. You even left your work apron at home. It doesn't make much difference. As you set your apple pie on the table, conversation hushes for a moment. The village healer eyes your contribution as if it might leap up and confess to a crime. "Smells good," she says, her voice 2 shades too high. "Is it just apples?" You assure her it is. No frogs, no bones, not a single hint of nightshade. She nods slowly, as if considering whether pies can lie. You wander the tables, trying to blend in. But blending is not your strong suit. You sample a bit of honey cake, chew it thoughtfully, and make a polite comment about the texture. The baker's wife smiles tightly and edges her tray just a little farther away. Children dare each other to take a bite of your pie, but nobody follows through. At one point, the blacksmith asks if your secret ingredient is justice. You laugh, but everyone else just sort of nods, as if that explains everything. Still, there's a strange camaraderie to the awkwardness. The butcher tells you his sausage rolls are 100% safe, and the innkeeper swears her tartlets are guaranteed not to haunt your dreams. You get the sense that nobody really trusts anyone's cooking, but it's more fun to pretend that the only thing at stake is a bit of indigestion. As the afternoon wears on, the children get braver. A group of them circle your pie, poking at the crust and daring the youngest to taste it. In the end, nobody does, but you're oddly touched by their curiosity. You cut a generous slice for the old woman who runs the candle stall. She tucks it away in her basket with a wink. Later, you spot her trading it to the blacksmith for a honey bun. In a way, your pie does make the rounds, just not by the usual means. When the sun begins to set and the tables have been picked over, your pie sits almost untouched. You wrap it back up and head home. Pie in one hand, the day's gossip in the other. Nobody ate your baking, but at least you get dessert for supper. And, more importantly, nobody got sick. That's a win by medieval standards. Back in your cottage, you pour yourself a cup of weak ale and savor a slice of your own pie. It's tart, crumbly, and oddly reassuring. You survived another bake sale, your reputation mostly intact, and your pie safe from suspicion. As the evening quiets and the world narrows to firelight, even torturers need salvation. You attend Mass, sitting in the very back. The priest prays for everyone's souls, pointedly glancing your way. Confession is awkward. Your sins take a while to list. For all the dark corners of your profession, there's no escaping the rhythm of church bells. Every Sunday, you follow the slow procession to the ancient stone church, rain or shine, cold or colder. The whole village is there. Children with scrubbed faces, grandmothers with baskets of eggs, farmers whose knees creak louder than the pews. You take your usual place on the last bench, as far from the altar as geography allows. It's not that you're unwelcome, exactly. It's just that nobody's quite sure what prayers cover your particular line of work. The priest, a kind man with worry lines and a surprisingly loud voice, welcomes the congregation. His sermons are equal parts warning and encouragement. Don't steal, be kind to your neighbors, and for heaven's sake, don't gossip. Everyone ignores that part. When he mentions forgiveness, he gives you an extra look, a mix of hope and mild concern, as if trying to gauge how many Our Fathers would balance your ledger. You listen carefully, bowing your head with everyone else, trying not to draw attention. When the priest talks about turning the other cheek, you keep your expression neutral. When he preaches about mercy, you cough into your sleeve. It's a delicate balance. You want to show piety without looking desperate, humility without looking like you've got something to hide. It's an art form, really. Sitting perfectly still while feeling the collective weight of 100 side glances. Confession is a local ritual and, for you, a logistical challenge. Most villagers slip into the wooden booth, whisper a few brief regrets, and emerge lighter. Your turn takes longer. You sit down across from the priest, his candle flickering between you, and begin your litany of sins. Some are routine. Impatience, pride. That time you snapped at the baker for selling you stale bread. Others are more specialized. Father, I may have used harsh words in the workplace. Also, possibly harsh implements. There's a pause while the priest decides whether to ask for details, then decides against it. You don't ask for absolution for your profession, exactly. You know it's a necessary evil, at least that's what everyone tells you. But you do ask for forgiveness for the small things. A harsh judgment, a missed kindness, a night when you let the darkness in your heart creep a little too far. The priest listens, nods, and gives penance measured in prayers, charitable deeds, and, once, the suggestion that you help repair the chapel's roof as a sign of good faith. You oblige. Fixing roof tiles is easier than fixing souls, anyway. After Mass, there's coffee, well, thin ale or water, but the intention is the same. Villagers linger, sharing news, trading bread, pretending not to notice you hovering near the biscuits. The children stare. The older folks murmur a greeting. The priest pats your shoulder and reminds you that redemption is for everyone, even those whose work is, shall we say, less than gentle. You leave the church feeling lighter, the scent of candle wax and old stone lingering in your clothes. Maybe nothing's changed, but for a moment, you're just another soul in need of grace, another face in the crowd. And as you walk home, you silently promise to try harder, to be kinder, or at least to keep your temper when the goat gets into the turnips again. Sleep comes late. Sometimes you dream of work, sometimes of running away to a farm and raising turnips. You keep a candle burning just in case. Nightmares are an occupational hazard. There's an odd quiet that settles over the cottage once the hearth embers fade and the world outside goes still. The pets are already curled up in their favorite corners. Wart the dog snoring, the cat needing the last clean blanket, the raven muttering softly in its sleep, or maybe just plotting. You should be exhausted, after all. There's not a part of your body that isn't tired, but rest doesn't come easy for the medieval conscience, especially one with your particular resume. You've developed a sleep routine, as much for comfort as for superstition. The door is barred, the window latched, your boots neatly placed beside the bed, so you're ready for anything, from fire to impromptu chicken invasion. You check the candle stub on the nightstand and light it. The faint golden glow, a flimsy shield against the dark. The shadows on the wall dance, stretching into shapes that sometimes look like old neighbors, old regrets, or old soup stains. Still, you tell yourself it's just the wind. Your mind likes to replay the day's events as soon as your head hits the straw-stuffed pillow. Every awkward encounter at the market, every half-finished conversation, every embarrassing stumble in front of the baker's daughter. Then come the snippets of work. Faces you try not to remember, voices you try not to hear. You shift and sigh, convincing yourself that if you just lie very still, your thoughts might get bored and wander off. Dreams, when they come, are strange and vivid. Sometimes you're back in the dungeon. Only now it's a cheerful kitchen and your tools are whisks and spoons. Sometimes you're running not from anyone, but toward a life you barely remember. A cottage far away, a field of stubborn turnips, a dog that never limps. You always wake just before you get there, heart beating a little too fast, covers tangled around your legs. The nightmares are a little more persistent. They show up in waves, old voices, old mistakes, fears that you're not quite the person you tell yourself you are. In some dreams, you're on trial in the village square, accused of unspeakable things, like baking a soggy pie. In others, you're lost in a labyrinth of corridors, every turn leading back to your own front door. Sometimes, it's just the feeling of being watched by the villagers, by history, by your own impossible standards. There are good dreams, too. You dream of laughter around the dinner table, a roof that never leaks, and the simple peace of being unremarkable. In one recurring dream, you're just another face in the crowd, buying bread, swapping gossip, invisible in the best possible way. You wake from these dreams wistful, a little sad, and oddly comforted. If dreams are a mirror, then at least yours remember who you'd like to be. Some nights, sleep is shallow, a string of half-dreams and restless tossing. The cat climbs onto your chest, purring you toward a gentler slumber. You listen to the wind outside and the distant sound of the church bell. Counting off the hours until dawn, you promise yourself that, tomorrow night, you'll try herbal tea, or a different blanket, or maybe just fewer regrets. Eventually, morning creeps in through the cracks of the shutters. The candle has burned low, the nightmares have retreated, and the dream of peace lingers just long enough to get you out of bed. In the Middle Ages, restful sleep is a kind of miracle. one you chase night after night, one quiet dream at a time. The village festival is a chance to relax. You join the sack race, but nobody wants to be your partner. You enter the pie-eating contest, where your victory is celebrated with nervous applause. You clap for yourself. Once a year, the village transforms from its usual patchwork of grumbling neighbors and muddy streets into something almost festive. Banners, really just old tunics strung together, hang from windows, and the square is swept, if not actually clean, then at least less hazardous. The air fills with the scent of roasting meat, spilled cider, and the faintest whiff of misplaced optimism. For one day, everyone tries to forget their grievances and embrace the ancient art of pretending to enjoy themselves. You wake up early on festival day, determined to blend in, just another face in the crowd, another pair of muddy boots. You don your least unnerving tunic and even attempt to smile in the mirror, though the results are mixed. The dog follows you to the festival, sensing the chance for dropped food and a break from the usual housework. You keep your expectations low. History has taught you that fitting in is harder than it looks. The festivities begin with music, fiddlers perched on barrels, singers losing their voices to the wind. The mayor, resplendent in his ceremonial hat, which is, in fact, just his everyday hat with a feather stuck in it, declares the festival open with a speech that mentions unity, good harvests, and, pointedly, the importance of everyone getting along. You nod dutifully, resisting the urge to point out that his hat feather is borrowed from your own chicken. First up, the sack race. You line up with the rest, eager for a bit of harmless fun, but as the start is called, you realize you're a team of one. No one wants to be your partner, not out of malice, just an abundance of caution. You hop bravely down the field, trying not to fall, the crowd politely silent except for one child who yells, "Go torturer!" You finish last, but at least you finish. Next is the pie-eating contest, a staple of every festival and your moment to shine. After all, eating in silence is your specialty. The rules are simple. Eat as much as you can, as fast as you can, and try not to choke. You breeze through your pie, crumbs everywhere, and win by a landslide. The applause that follows is subdued, tinged with uncertainty. You thank the host and clap for yourself, because sometimes you have to be your own cheering section. The afternoon rolls on with games, dancing, and more food. You join the tug of war, but your reputation as someone who works with ropes sends the rest of your team looking for urgent errands. You dance the first round of the circle dance, careful not to step on toes, but partners trade places quickly when you approach. You don't take it personally. Old habits die hard. Still, there are moments of connection. A neighbor offers you a mug of cider, a child asks you to judge the turnip carving contest, and the baker's wife compliments your embroidery, even if she does so from a safe distance. For a few hours, you are simply part of the background, lost in a sea of laughter, music, and the peculiar joy of communal awkwardness. As dusk settles and the lanterns flicker to life, you walk home, tired but oddly content. You may never truly blend in, but for one day you were a little less apart, a little more included. Festivals, you realize, are less about belonging and more about showing up, taking part, even if you have to clap for yourself. Locks are rare, but you have 3. You check them twice. The house creaks, the wind howls, and you swear you heard a villager whisper, "He's home from the hedges." Welcome to the medieval version of a ring doorbell, a suspiciously sharp stick. Medieval home security is mostly about hope. Hope that your front door stays closed. Hope that your neighbors are too busy to snoop. And hope that the wind rattling your shutters is just the wind. Still, you take no chances. Your reputation may scare off most would-be intruders, but you're not about to leave your fate to the honor system. Besides, paranoia is a professional perk. Your cottage boasts a collection of security features that would make any passing noble jealous, or at least deeply confused. First, there are the locks. True, most villagers settle for a simple latch, maybe a well-placed broom, but you've upgraded. 3 wooden bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, and one you made yourself out of stubbornness and leftover bedpost, slide home with a satisfying thud. You check them every night, twice before bed, once more if the moon looks particularly suspicious. Outside, you've strategically placed a few sharp sticks near the windows. They're nothing special, just ordinary branches, but pointed in such a way that any sneaky hands, or especially bold chickens, will think twice about entry. Wart the dog is your unofficial sentry. He naps by the door, one ear cocked, and will bark at anything from a wandering cat to the sound of your own sneezes. If anyone tries to get in, Wart will either bravely defend the homestead or roll over and demand a belly rub. You choose to believe in the former. Paranoia doesn't end at hardware. You've mastered the art of listening for trouble. Each creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the rafters becomes a familiar part of the night's background music. Still, sometimes you catch a sound that doesn't belong, a snapped twig, the faint shuffle of feet outside, a muttered phrase you're pretty sure includes your name. It's probably just your imagination. Probably, on occasion, you're greeted by a neighbor who claims to have lost a chicken or dropped a glove somewhere near your garden. They're never quite convincing, and you never quite let them in, but you offer a polite smile and a firm goodbye. Trust is scarce, and you've found it's best to keep the cottage and your secrets locked up tight. When storms sweep through the village, you check the windows for loose latches and wedge a heavy bench against the door. There's a certain comfort in fortifying your little fortress. Even if the only thing you're keeping out is the rain, the cat patrols the perimeter, looking for drafts, while the raven squawks an occasional warning from its perch. You like to imagine they're part of an elite security team, but mostly they're just in it for the warm fire and the occasional snack. Despite all your precautions, you know true safety is an illusion. No amount of locks can keep out bad luck, nosy villagers, or the latest rumor. Still, you do what you can. You hang a sprig of herbs above the door for good measure, and recite a half-remembered charm the herbalist once taught you. May thieves get tangled in goat nettles and drop their spoons. You're not sure it works, but you've never lost a spoon, so who's to say? As you tuck yourself in each night, you listen to the wind and let the little rituals soothe your nerves. The world outside might be full of unknowns, but here, within your creaking, fortified walls, you've carved out a pocket of safety, one lock, one stick, and one slightly overworked dog at a time. Elections are happening. You are not on the ballot. You try to vote, but your paper is mysteriously misplaced. Democracy in action. Politics in a medieval village is a peculiar blend of wishful thinking, family feuds, and the occasional bribery by pie. Officially, the village council exists to keep the peace, decide on grazing rights, and organize festivals. Unofficially, it's an excuse for the oldest families to argue in public and for everyone else to grumble in private. Every few years, sometimes more often if the mayor's goat gets loose, there's an election. It's never clear who's running or what they stand for, but everyone votes anyway, mostly for whoever brought the freshest bread. You approach the meeting hall on voting day with cautious optimism. Maybe this year things will be different. Maybe, just maybe, someone will suggest fixing the bridge or dream of dreams, adding a second market stall for onions. You clutch your little scrap of parchment, feeling a strange flutter of civic pride. After all, even torturers have opinions about potholes. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of sweat, ink, and anticipation. The villagers crowd together, filling every available seat. Jostling for space and for a glimpse at the official ballot, a piece of wood, hastily chalked with names and symbols. You look for your own name out of curiosity. Not there, of course. It's an unspoken rule. Torturers are allowed to keep the peace, but not to influence it. You line up to cast your vote, trying to look like everyone else. The old man in front of you has voted for the same person since the plague, regardless of who's running. The woman behind you is already whispering about a conspiracy involving the Cheesemakers Guild. When it's finally your turn, you hand over your vote with a nod and a hopeful smile. That's when things get interesting. The official, who is also the village baker, the bell ringer, and the self-appointed keeper of order, squints at your ballot, then at you. "Strange," he mutters, shuffling papers. "Seems we're missing one." You offer to write your name again, but he waves you away, saying, "Don't worry, we'll sort it out." You know exactly what that means. Your civic duty has, once again, vanished into the great bureaucratic void. You watch the votes get tallied, each name read aloud in turn. The mayor, naturally, the miller's cousin, the innkeeper, running on a strong platform of shorter sermons and longer lunches, and a wild card, someone's pet goat, who received 2 votes and a round of polite applause. Your vote is never mentioned. No one seems surprised. Afterwards, the winners shake hands, promise change, and immediately begin planning the next harvest festival. You linger, sipping weak ale and eavesdropping on the real political action, the trading of gossip, recipes, and grudges. The new councillor can't even count turnips, someone hisses. "Well, at least he's not the torturer," comes the reply, followed by the awkward silence of people who just realized you're standing behind them. You walk home, ballotless but strangely at peace. Politics, you reflect, is less about who's in charge and more about who gets to complain about it. As long as the roads stay muddy and the goats keep wandering, nothing will really change. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Back at your cottage, you pin your unused ballot to the wall, just in case anyone asks. You pour yourself a drink, toast the victorious goat, and promise yourself that next year you'll campaign on a platform everyone can get behind. More pie, fewer speeches, and at least one council meeting devoted to the urgent matter of missing socks. Your neighbor builds a fence 2 inches onto your land. You draft a sternly worded note. Then remember, nobody can read. You move the fence at night. The feud will last generations. There's nothing quite so timeless or so thoroughly medieval as a good, old-fashioned neighborly feud. The kind of dispute that begins with a stray goat or a wandering chicken and escalates until nobody remembers the original cause, but everyone remembers the bitterness. In your case, the feud starts innocently enough. A new fence, built ever so slightly off from where it stood last season. Just 2 inches, but in a village where land is measured by boot prints and family pride, 2 inches might as well be the width of a river. At first, you try to let it go. After all, you have a job that encourages patience. But every time you walk past the fence, it needles at you, crooked, mocking, and planted firmly in your personal territory. The neighbor, Old Man Hob, is a veteran of the petty war. He's got a squint that could sour milk and a memory for slights longer than the parish roll. Every morning, he stands in his yard, arms crossed, daring you to make the first move. You decide to respond with dignity. You write a stern note. "Dearest neighbor, I regret to inform you that your fence has encroached on my rightful land. Kindly rectify this grievous error, or I shall be forced to take further action." Then you remember, nobody in the village reads, least of all Old Man Hob. You consider a drawing but doubt he'd appreciate your attempt at art. So, you take the medieval approach. Passive, aggressive action under cover of darkness. One cloudy night, with only the cat as your witness, you sneak outside and nudge the fence back to its proper spot. Not too much, just enough to reclaim your 2 inches. The next morning, the fence is mysteriously straightened. Hobbs' squint intensifies, but he says nothing. The game is on. Over the following weeks, the fence drifts back and forth, sometimes by your hand, sometimes by his. Occasionally, you find odd items left by the fence post. A single turnip, a rusty nail, once even a chicken feather tied to a bit of twine. You're not sure if these are warnings, invitations, or just the random detritus of rural life. You leave a carrot in return, just to see what happens. The rest of the village is fully invested in the drama. The blacksmith places bets on how far the fence will move by midsummer. Children invent songs about the war of the wooden stakes. Even the priest gets involved, offering a blessing for peace and straight fences during Sunday Mass. You smile politely, but you know there's no truce until someone gives up or dies. As time goes on, the feud takes on a life of its own. It's not really about land anymore. It's about tradition, stubbornness, and the strangely comforting cycle of small conflicts that make village life what it is. You and Hob develop a kind of mutual respect, communicated through grunts, nods, and the careful avoidance of direct eye contact. One night, after a particularly blustery storm, you find the fence collapsed in a heap. You and Hob, wordlessly, fix it together, each of you reclaiming your preferred 2 inches with silent determination. It's the closest thing to a peace treaty you'll ever sign. You attempt a new stew recipe. It goes badly. The house fills with smoke. The raven coughs. You eat it anyway. What's the worst that could happen? In a world where meals are mostly predictable, pottage, bread, pottage again, trying something new in the kitchen is an act of medieval bravery. You don't have a cookbook, just a handful of rumors, a neighbor's vague instructions, and the lingering hope that turnips can taste like anything other than disappointment if you just try hard enough. Tonight, you feel bold. You decide to create a stew like they make in the next county. According to the woman at the market, who may or may not have been joking, the recipe, as far as you can remember, includes the usual suspects: onions, root vegetables, whatever is left in the pantry, a sprig of suspiciously dry herbs, and something for flavor. You pick through the storage jars, discover an old carrot, some wrinkled garlic, and a chunk of cheese you don't fully trust. You throw them all in the pot, because adventure is what separates you from the goats. The fire is tricky. Not enough wood, and your stew will never boil. Too much, and the whole house smells like burnt hope. You settle on a cautious middle ground. You stir with determination, watching as the ingredients swirl and meld into something not entirely unlike food. The cat inspects your work, then wanders off with a look that says, "I'll come back if you survive." Things go sideways quickly. The stew bubbles over. The flames leap higher than you expect, licking the sides of the pot and sending up smoke signals that could summon half the village. You cough, wave a rag at the window, and try to look confident as the raven launches a harsh commentary from the rafters. Wart, the dog, disappears under the table, and the cat follows. You press on. After all, surrender is for peasants and children. You are a culinary pioneer, and no one will remember the smoke, hopefully. Once the worst of the chaos subsides, you take stock. The stew is thick, possibly sentient. It smells like ambition and bad decisions, but you're determined to see it through. You ladle a cautious spoonful, blow on it, and taste. It is, without exaggeration, the saltiest thing you've ever put in your mouth. Also the blandest. How does it manage both? You ponder the mystery, add a little more water, then a lot more water, and try again. Slightly better, Still, it's edible, which is all anyone can ask of medieval cuisine. You serve yourself a bowl, sprinkle it with a hopeful pinch of dried something, and sit down to eat. The first bite is underwhelming. The second, tolerable. By the third, you decide you could get used to it. The cat reappears, sniffs your bowl, and leaves again. You take that as a compliment. Later, you'll find the pot stuck to the bottom with a layer of stubborn black residue that defies all known methods of cleaning. You'll consider throwing it out the window, but remember what happened last time. Old Man Hob nearly started a second fence war. You soak it overnight, praying that tomorrow's you is braver, or at the very least has better ideas. Despite the chaos, there's a certain pride in trying something new. Sure, nobody else will eat it, and the dog has taken to eyeing you with concern. But you tried, and that counts for something. Cooking, like life, is an experiment. Sometimes you fail spectacularly. Sometimes you accidentally invent something edible, and sometimes you just fill the house with smoke. Games night is tense. You play chess against the baker and lose in 5 moves. You try dice, but everyone assumes you cheat. You don't, but you wish you did. Board games in the Middle Ages aren't quite the cozy, fireside affairs that modern evenings promise. There are no glossy boxes or friendly rule sheets, no colourful meeples or plastic tokens. Just worn wooden boards, hand-carved pieces, and a set of rules that seem to change depending on who's currently winning. Yet, game night is a regular event, a way for the village to unwind, gossip, and, sometimes, let their competitive instincts run wild. As long as there's ale to fuel the courage, you arrive at the tavern as dusk settles, board tucked under your arm, your reputation preceding you as always. Tonight's main event, chess with the baker. The pieces are a motley assortment, some whittled from driftwood, others scavenged from old sets, with one pawn represented by a suspiciously clean chicken bone. You sit across from the baker, trying your best to appear harmless. You make your opening move, but 5 turns later, your king is cornered, your rook has vanished, possibly eaten by the dog, and the baker is already setting up for another round. You thank him for the match and silently vow to practice against the cat, who's only slightly less ruthless. Next, you're drawn into a round of dice. The rules are simple: whoever rolls highest wins. But as soon as you pick up the dice, the crowd leans in and the suspicion is palpable. "Careful," someone mutters. "He's got clever hands." You roll anyway, landing a perfectly ordinary 7, but the win is met with awkward silence and a few nervous glances. You can't blame them. Your day job isn't exactly known for fostering trust. Still, you wish you actually were as cunning as they think. At least then, you might win a round or 2. Dice games in the tavern are chaotic at the best of times. The rules shift depending on who's playing and who's pouring the drinks. Sometimes you're told to double your bet. Other times, the highest roll wins a round of stale bread from behind the bar. You win once more, and the innkeeper raises an eyebrow. You try to look innocent, which is, of course, impossible. The dice get passed quickly to the next player, who accidentally drops them under the table and swaps them for another set. You say nothing. Medieval gamesmanship is more about diplomacy than skill. There's always someone eager to raise the stakes, and before long, a round of tables, a kind of medieval backgammon, begins at the far table. The pieces are smooth stones, the board is scarred and stained, and the air is thick with anticipation. You watch, content to be a spectator, letting the villagers argue about the rules and accuse each other of witchcraft-level luck. Someone claims the baker has a lucky bread crust in his pocket. Someone else starts an argument over whether the tanner's dice are weighted with sand. You just sip your ale and enjoy the chaos. Throughout the night, there are friendly accusations, exaggerated boasts, and the occasional dispute that ends with the threat of a rematch at dawn. In the world of medieval board games, victory is fleeting, and defeat is just another excuse to laugh, drink, and retell the same stories next week. Cheating is suspected, rarely proven, and never actually punished, except in the court of public opinion. You may not win much, but you enjoy the ritual, the click of wooden pieces, the roll of dice, the laughter and groans as fortunes turn. As the evening winds down, you gather your mismatched chessmen, wish everyone luck, and slip into the night, slightly poorer in coins but richer in stories. Gardening is surprisingly peaceful. You grow herbs, turnips, and something that might be illegal. The turnips are enormous. You name them. One is called Reginald. No one expects the village torturer to have a green thumb. But your little patch of earth behind the cottage is your sanctuary. Unlike people, plants never gossip, don't flinch at your presence, and are entirely indifferent to rumors. You find solace among the rows of stubborn vegetables, their leaves reaching up each morning as if determined to outdo one another in enthusiasm. The soil is rich. The sunlight, when it makes an appearance, is kind. And for a few precious moments every day, you're not an object of suspicion, but just another humble gardener with muddy knees. Your pride and joy are the turnips. Not because you particularly like the taste, but because they seem uniquely suited to medieval neglect and drama. Each spring, you plant them with almost ceremonial care, tucking the seeds into little trenches and patting the dirt down with a gentleness that might surprise your colleagues. You water them faithfully, mutter encouragement, and occasionally fend off the neighbor's goat, who, as far as you can tell, has a taste for forbidden vegetables. As the weeks go by, the turnips swell beneath the surface, quiet, patient, and secretly monstrous. By midsummer, they're the talk of the garden, if not the village. You give them names, partly to amuse yourself, partly because it's hard not to get attached. Reginald is the biggest, a proper bruiser, with a crown of glossy leaves and a girth that could stun a bishop. There's also Mildred, a delicate little thing who refuses to grow in a straight line, and Bertrand, who leans dramatically to the left as if protesting the whole idea of root vegetables. You're fairly sure the raven is plotting to steal at least one, and the cat has taken to sleeping in the onion bed, judging everyone's progress. It's not just turnips, of course. You grow what you can. Onions, leeks, sage, and the occasional experimental herb whose name you can't quite pronounce. Some days you suspect it might not be entirely legal, but as long as it keeps the flies away and smells good, you're not asking questions. Gardening, you've learned, is as much about improvisation as survival, just like everything else in your life. The act of tending your garden is deeply meditative. You lose track of time while weeding, your mind wandering as your hands work. Here, under the open sky, you can think about nothing and everything. Last week's awkward run-in at the market, your ongoing feud with the neighbor about the fence, whether or not you should try growing carrots next year. The chores are honest, the work repetitive, the rewards both edible and deeply personal. Harvest time is a minor holiday in your household. You dig up your turnips with ceremony, holding each one aloft for inspection. Some are perfectly round. Others look like they've lived through a small war. You clean them up, line them on the windowsill, and decide which will be eaten, which will be given away, and which will be entered in the highly competitive and entirely unofficial Village Vegetable Contest. Reginald is always a contender. By nightfall, you sit in your garden, surrounded by the quiet contentment that only soil and sweat can provide. The air is thick with the smell of fresh earth and bruised leaves. The raven picks at a stray worm. Wart the dog sleeps at your feet, dreaming of stolen radishes. For a few hours, you forget about your day job, your reputation, and the odd looks from passing villagers. You catch a cold. You try all the medieval cures, garlic, leeches, prayer, and yelling at your own feet. Nothing works. Your cat looks disappointed. Getting sick in the Middle Ages is less a matter of if, and more a matter of how often. There's always something going around. Coughs, chills, fevers, suspicious rashes, and that annual case of turnip nose nobody talks about. It starts with a sneeze you can't blame on the cat. Then your head fills with fog, your bones with gravel, and every villager with helpful, if questionable, advice. The first thing you do is rummage through your herbal stash. Medieval medicine is mostly based on the philosophy that more is better. So, you chew garlic until your breath could scare off raiders, swallow a dubious potion made from onion skins and honey, and rub sage leaves on your temples for luck. The herbalist swears by a tea so bitter you're convinced it's just ground-up disappointment steeped in regret. You drink it anyway, hopeful for a miracle. When the garlic doesn't help, you try leeches. Medieval logic insists that removing a little blood will balance the humors, which supposedly cures everything from headaches to heartbreak. You gather a jar of leeches from the stream and bravely stick one to your ankle. Wart the dog watches in horrified fascination. The cat, meanwhile, looks insulted that you'd let anything else bite you first. After an hour, you're a little lighter, but not much better. The next step is prayer. You light a candle, kneel on the cold floor, and make deals with every saint you can name. Saint Blaise, if you cure my sore throat, I promise never to steal old man Hobbs' onions again. Sometimes you feel better just for having tried. Other times, you get up and realize your knees hurt more than your head. Of course, every neighbor has a cure. The blacksmith suggests a mustard poultice, which sounds suspiciously like something he uses on horses. The baker offers bread soaked in vinegar. The priest suggests confession. You try them all, sometimes at once, hoping for relief, or at least a distraction. The remedies work about as well as you'd expect. Your cold lingers, your breath frightens the chickens, and your hands are stained an unholy color from all the poultices. Then come the superstitions. You tie a red string around your wrist, wear a garlic necklace, and stuff a turnip under your pillow to draw out the fever. Someone says you must not look in a mirror before sunrise or your illness will stick for another year. You avoid mirrors just in case. The raven suggests, with persistent cawing, that you should stay in bed. The dog agrees, curling up by your feet in solidarity. The cat simply walks across your chest, as if to remind you that you're not dying yet. Sick days in the Middle Ages are slow, hazy affairs. You drift between fever dreams and reality, wrapped in scratchy blankets, sipping endless cups of herbal sludge. Time stretches, chores pile up, and your only visitor is the occasional worried neighbor, bearing broth, bread, or unsolicited advice. The worst part is how much you miss your usual routine. You never thought you'd long for the smell of wood smoke or the gentle chaos of chores. Eventually, the fever breaks. You wake to a quieter world, your head clearer, your body tired but grateful. The cat purrs beside you, the dog wags his tail, and the raven caws his approval. You survived. Maybe it was the garlic, the leeches, the prayers, or maybe, just maybe, it was simply time. You dream of retiring, maybe opening a bakery, maybe raising sheep, maybe just not being recognized in the market. One day, you'll get there. For now, there's always the after-work pie. Even in the Middle Ages, the fantasy of retirement is alive and well. Your joints creak louder every year, your patience grows thinner, and sometimes you catch yourself daydreaming about a future where work means choosing which apple to eat in the afternoon sundae. It's an odd concept for a torturer. No gold watch, no pension, just the hope of slipping quietly out of public memory before the next ambitious apprentice takes your spot. Sometimes, on slow afternoons, You sit by the window and imagine a new life. Maybe you'll become the village baker. Your only concern the rising of dough and the perfect flakiness of pastry. You picture yourself behind a flour-dusted counter, the smell of fresh bread filling the cottage, townsfolk lining up for a loaf without fear or awkward glances. Your notorious past might become a curious footnote. Did you hear the baker used to be the torturer? But you suspect that if the bread is good enough, no one will care. Other days, you dream of raising sheep on a hill far from the village. There, it wouldn't matter what anyone thought, as long as you kept the wolves at bay and the lambs in the field. You'd spend your days walking the green slopes, naming each sheep after people who once gave you trouble at work, and your evenings knitting questionable sweaters for the raven and the dog. No deadlines, no dungeons, just wool and quiet. Of course, there's also the fantasy of perfect anonymity. In your daydreams, you stroll through the market as just another face in the crowd. No more mysterious than the tanner or the woman who sells suspiciously crunchy pickles. You'd buy onions, sample cheese, and gossip about the price of eggs. Nobody would whisper or cross themselves as you passed. You'd be free to laugh too loudly or dance badly at the festival. You could finally clap for yourself in public without the crowd wondering what you're planning. For now, reality is more complicated. Retiring as a torturer isn't exactly straightforward. There's always another confession to take, another neighbor's goat to wrangle, another festival where they just need someone strong to move the tables. Still, you plan for the future in small ways. Saving a little extra bread, patching your best tunic, and teaching the cat how to catch mice without so much drama. You even contemplate taking on an apprentice, someone with strong arms and a knack for not asking questions. You practice for retirement by baking pies on your day off. It's not quite running a bakery, but the house smells better, and you get dessert for your trouble. Wart the dog is a loyal taste tester, even if he seems to prefer turnips. And the raven offers color commentary from the rafters. Sometimes you share your pies with neighbors, watching their suspicion fade with each bite. It's a start, a little kindness to nudge your reputation from legend to local curiosity. At night, you tuck yourself in, dreams still circling like sheep in a distant field. You remind yourself that, one day, you might trade the tools of your trade for a garden spade, a rolling pin, or just a quiet bench by the fire. Until then, you keep your hopes close and your pies closer. You crave companionship like everyone else, but your conversational openers, so how was the execution, tend to stall at hello. You try chatting with the blacksmith about weather and anvils, but he's suddenly very interested in polishing the same horseshoe for 20 minutes. You wonder if you should get a dog, or a puppet, or just practice your smile in the mirror without the teeth. Making friends as a medieval torturer is a project that requires creativity, stamina, and an acceptance of frequent, awkward silences. There are days you watch the villagers gather in clusters, laughing, sharing gossip, debating the best way to keep chickens out of the cabbages, and feel the cold tickle of loneliness. Sure, you have your pets, but there's something about human company that even the most judgmental cat can't replace. You begin your efforts where most friendships start. Small talk. Unfortunately, your conversational instincts have been shaped by years spent in dungeons and courtrooms. Your opening lines, intended to be friendly, almost always veer toward the unsettling. Did you sleep well? Sounds menacing coming from you, especially when followed by, I'm always up early myself. You practice in private, reciting safe topics, weather, crops, bread quality. Even these land awkwardly. You try joining in at the blacksmith's forge, hoping to chat about ironwork. Hot day, isn't it? You venture. The blacksmith nods vigorously and suddenly remembers a pile of horseshoes that require urgent and silent attention. You try again with the candlemaker. That's a lovely wick you have there, and she almost drops her best mold. Social cues, it turns out, are a minefield when your professional aura can clear a room. You consider more indirect routes. You bake bread and leave it on doorsteps. Sign it only with a smiley face. You offer to help the miller with heavy lifting. You compliment the healer's herbs, though you avoid mentioning how many you've tried to cure your own unsociable reputation. Sometimes your efforts earn you a wary thank you. Other times just a slammed door. But every so often, someone surprises you. The innkeeper nods when you greet him in the morning. The baker's youngest waves, albeit from a safe distance. Small victories. Social gatherings offer more opportunity and more risk. You brave the tavern, order a round of ale, and try to join a conversation about the upcoming festival. Someone brings up pies. You mention you've been practicing your crust. A hush falls over the table, and you can almost see them wondering what exactly you've put in your pies. You sip your ale and smile, careful to keep your teeth hidden. You even try games night, but your presence at the chessboard is met with nervous laughter. You move your knight, and the room remembers urgent chores elsewhere. Still, you stay, and when a game of dice begins, you toss your coins into the pot. You lose, of course, but the company, however fleeting, is a win. Some evenings, you take your search for friendship to the next level, rehearsing new facial expressions in the warped bit of glass that passes for a mirror. A smile, you discover, looks slightly more reassuring if you keep your mouth closed and your eyebrows relaxed. The cat watches with an expression of profound disappointment, but you persist. Maybe one day you'll find just the right balance of friendly and forgettable. Until then, you keep trying. You practice safe topics, you help with chores, you leave anonymous gifts. You remind yourself that friendship is a slow, stubborn process, much like baking bread or growing turnips. And sometimes, at the end of a long day, you find comfort in the knowledge that the road to companionship is paved with small talk, lumpy loaves, and the occasional, accidental compliment. For all your iron tools and terrifying reputation, you've got a gentle side. Maybe it's secret poetry, or a shockingly good lute solo after a few ales. Maybe you carve little wooden figurines and leave them in doorways for kids to find. Nobody ever suspects it's you. You like it that way. It's hard to be both the town's gentle artist and its reason nobody skips jury duty. You never set out to hide your softer hobbies. It just happened naturally when you're best known for, shall we say, persuasive work. Nobody expects to see you lingering in the garden, humming folk tunes or scratching love notes onto birch bark. But everyone, even the most misunderstood medieval soul, needs a place to put their kindness. Yours just happens to be off the main road, behind the cottage, where nobody can watch. It started with poetry. On long nights after work, you found yourself scribbling lines in the margins of old ledgers, writing rhymes about rain or hope or the color of turnips after a storm. You never show these to anyone, of course. They're tucked in the back of the wardrobe with the other secrets. The cat once tried to eat a stanza about moonlight, but you rescued it in time. Sometimes, when sleep is far away, you read them back to yourself and remember that words can be as powerful as any tool. Then there's music. You own a battered lute, rescued from a market stall for half a loaf of bread and a promise to not play after midnight. Alone in your cottage, you pluck out quiet melodies, letting the notes tumble into the darkness. Wart the dog is your main audience, loyal and tone-deaf, always ready for an encore. Once, you played at the Midsummer Festival, hidden behind a screen. The crowd applauded the mystery minstrel, and for a single night your reputation was more melody than menace. Your most visible secret is woodcarving. What began as a way to pass nervous energy soon became an act of quiet rebellion. You carve animals, stars, and clumsy hearts, leaving them on windowsills, in baskets, and on fence posts for the children to find. No one suspects you. Rumor says it's the fairies, or perhaps the old widow down the lane. But you know the truth, and it makes you smile. You've never seen a child unhappy to find a wooden fox or rabbit in their pocket. And for a moment, you feel like you've left a softer footprint on the world. Sometimes, your softer side leaks out in other ways. You help the healer gather herbs, offering your height to reach the best sprigs of yarrow. You sneak extra bread into the widow's basket at market. Once, you found a lost kitten and left it on the baker's stoop, wrapped in your old scarf. No one thanked you, but that's not the point. It's enough to see the world look a little brighter, a little kinder, even if nobody knows whom to thank. It's a careful balance, this life of hidden gentleness. You still wear your mask at work, still keep your voice even and your stride measured. But behind the closed door of your cottage, or beneath the ancient tree in the field, you are free to be gentle, awkward, and quietly hopeful. You are proof that people are rarely just what they seem, and that everyone, no matter how frightening on the outside, carries a secret collection of soft spots inside. Just as you're settling in with a bowl of pottage, there's a knock. It's the bishop's men, again. They want to know if you're keeping busy and, coincidentally, if you're available for a weekend project involving heretics and maybe some light paperwork. You sigh, put on your best tunic, and pray the paperwork is literal for once. Unexpected guests in the Middle Ages are rarely a pleasant surprise, and the bishop's men are the worst of all. They arrive in pairs, one silent, one eager, both dressed in crisp black, smelling faintly of incense and old leather. Their arrival always coincides with the moment you've just sat down, spoon halfway to your mouth, dinner hot and unguarded for the first time all week. The dog barks. The cat vanishes. The raven takes to the rafters and refuses to come down. You try to keep your face neutral as you open the door. "Evening," says the taller one, peering past you into your cottage. He tries to look casual, but his boots are too clean for that. "We're just making the rounds," he says, which you know is code for. "We have a list and your name is always on it." The silent one just stares, eyes fixed on your stew, as if heresy might be hiding under the potatoes. They step inside, uninvited boots, leaving neat prints on your swept floor. You offer them ale, out of politeness, not generosity. They decline, preferring to stand awkwardly by the fire. The taller one launches into his routine. Rumors, unrest, questions about your availability. He drops hints about heretics, deviltry, and the importance of community vigilance. You nod at all the right moments, thinking about your unfinished dinner and the turnips you meant to harvest before dark. Then comes the paperwork. You always hope it means copying confessions, but sometimes it's just inventory. Lists of candles, lists of tithes, lists of people who haven't attended Mass in 3 weeks. You try not to look bored. You also try not to look too interested. The trick is to seem just diligent enough to be useful, but not so eager they think you're hiding something. The conversation drifts into familiar territory. Have you seen anything unusual? Any suspicious meetings? Any villagers with foreign habits, like reading, or having too many cats? You shake your head, all innocence, and suggest perhaps they should check with Old Man Hob, whose fence has been especially crooked this season. They jot down notes, nod sagely, and promise to look into it. You mentally add Hob's fence to the growing list of things you're not responsible for. By the time they're satisfied, your stew is cold and the night is deep. They leave as suddenly as they arrived, parting with a warning about vigilance and the promise of further collaboration. You close the door, throw another log on the fire, and stare at your untouched dinner. Wart creeps back from under the table. The cat emerges from her hiding spot, and the raven makes a disapproving sound like the last word in a long argument. Unexpected visits from the Inquisition are, in the end, just another part of your medieval routine. They remind you that, No matter how hard you try to build a quiet life, the world is always ready to intrude, with paperwork, suspicion, and a side of cold stew. You heat your dinner back up, share a scrap with the dog, and toast to surviving another inspection. After a long week, you attempt a little medieval me time. This means staring at a beeswax candle, rearranging your 4 precious pebbles, and meditating on whether your left ankle is cursed. You consider herbal tea, but it's just warm ditch water with a leaf in it. Still, for a fleeting moment, you almost feel relaxed, until the neighbor's rooster screams again. Self-care in the Middle Ages is less about scented bubble baths and more about making the best of whatever comforts you can cobble together. It starts with ritual, sometimes out of belief, sometimes just out of habit. Your beeswax candle is your prized possession, the luxury equivalent of a modern spa day. You light it carefully, watching the flame dance in the gloom of your cottage. Its golden light turning everything just a bit softer, a bit less real. Next comes your collection of healing stones. You found them on your way to the well. One is perfectly round, another is suspiciously purple, and the rest just feel good in your hand. You arrange them on the table in various patterns, hoping to channel some invisible energy or at least distract yourself from the draft. Some evenings, you balance the purple one on your forehead and wait for wisdom to descend. It never does, but you do get a lovely impression in your skin, which the cat seems to admire. You try meditating, as much as anyone can meditate in a house full of pets and questionable noises. You sit cross-legged by the fire, hands on your knees, focusing on your breath. In, out, in, out. You count your heartbeats. Contemplate your ankle, still slightly suspicious, and try to ignore the chorus of farm animals outside. Just as you begin to relax, the neighbor's rooster lets out a crow that sounds more like a medieval bagpipe than a bird. You open one eye, sigh, and keep going. Serenity in the Middle Ages is mostly about persistence. Herbal tea is the next step. You pluck a few leaves from your medicinal herb pot, mostly mint, possibly nettle, and that mysterious sprig the healer gave you for balance. You steep them in hot water, filtered, you hope, from yesterday's rain barrel, and sip carefully. It tastes mostly like hope and slightly like disappointment. Still, it's warm, and for a moment, you almost feel the tension leave your shoulders. You add to the atmosphere with a little sound therapy, not crystal bowls or gentle chimes, but the dog snoring, the cat purring on the hearth, and the distant cawing of the raven. Some would call it noise. You call it authentic medieval ambience. You focus on the crackle of the fire, the flicker of candlelight, and the way the shadows soften the edges of your world. Here, in this tiny sanctuary, even the rumors and worries feel farther away. Self-care also means allowing yourself the occasional indulgence. You cut an extra slice of pie, settle into your most comfortable, least lumpy chair, and wrap yourself in the blanket your mother patched for you years ago. You might even hum a tune, quietly, so no one can accuse you of singing. It's not luxury, but it's yours. As the evening stretches, you realize how important these moments are. The world outside can wait. The neighbor's rooster, the crooked fence, the next day's chores. For now, you let your thoughts wander, warmed by candlelight, grounded by your stones, comforted by the little rituals that make you feel, in some small way, whole. Nobody lasts forever, not even you. You notice a young apprentice lurking at the back of the crowd, asking questions like, does the rack go clockwise, and is there a union? You consider taking them under your wing, but decide to start with the basics. Rule 1, always wash your hands. Rule 2, never talk about work at dinner. Rule 3, learn to bake, just in case. There comes a time in every medieval career, yes, even yours, when the question of legacy rears its head. You're not getting any younger, and the aches in your knees seem to arrive a little earlier each winter. The villagers, for all their suspicion, would panic if you suddenly disappeared. So you start to look out for someone to take up the mantle. Someone with the right blend of curiosity, nerves, and the ability to keep a straight face while listening to ridiculous rumors. Enter your would-be apprentice, a pale youth, barely old enough to remember the last big festival, hovering at the edge of the market square. He's got that mixture of fascination and terror you remember from your own early days. He watches your every move, how you buy onions, how you patch your boots, how you nod politely but never too warmly. You catch him mimicking your posture in the reflection of the bakery window. Then, ducking away when you notice, you approach him gently, not wanting to startle the poor lad into a sprint. Ever think about a future in civic service? You ask, keeping your tone light. He nods, wide-eyed, then immediately asks, "Is there a uniform?" You smile. Everyone loves a good uniform. Training begins with the basics. You don't start with the dramatic stuff. No, first it's sweeping, organizing tools, learning how to blend in at the market without buying too much garlic, a rookie mistake. You stress the importance of reputation, how to maintain just enough mystery to keep people at bay, but not so much that the baker refuses you bread. These are the subtleties of the trade, the little skills that separate the legends from the cautionary tales. Wash your hands, you tell him, at least 3 times a day. Even if you haven't touched anything, he dutifully complies, though you suspect he's really just enjoying the novelty of hot water. Never talk about work at dinner, you add. Nobody wants to hear about the dungeon with their stew. He grimaces, then asks, "Is it true you once made a nobleman confess with nothing but a stale loaf and a story about turnips?" You neither confirm nor deny. You make sure to teach a few softer skills too. Learn to bake, you say, handing him your favorite pie recipe. Not everything in this job should be grim. A good pie can open more doors than a dozen keys. He tries, but his first attempt is an unmitigated disaster. A crust so hard the raven gives up pecking, and the cat refuses to nap near it. You encourage him anyway. Resilience is key. Sometimes, the apprentice brings up questions about ethics and reputation. "Do they ever stop talking about you?" he asks one night. You tell him the truth. The rumors never end. But you learn to live alongside them, to let the legend do the hard work. If you're lucky, you add, people remember your pies longer than your confessions. As the months pass, your apprentice grows more confident, less jumpy, even capable of making small talk at the bake sale without clearing the table. You watch with a strange pride as he learns to balance caution with kindness, humor with authority. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your clean sheets, spare a drowsy thought for our misunderstood medieval friend, the torturer, clocking out after another long day at the office. Because for all the drama, all the dread, and all the awkward silences at the tavern, these were still just people at the end of their shift. People who, just like you, tried to carve out little pockets of comfort, whether that meant a secret garden, a pet raven, or simply a slightly less lumpy chair by the fire. Their nights were filled with the same small worries we all have. Did I do my job right? Is there anything good for dinner? Will the neighbor's goat ever stop screaming? Sure, their hobbies were a bit heavier on turnips and local superstition, and their networking events usually ended in a hanging. But the everyday struggle to unwind, connect, and dream of something better is as human as it gets. In the quiet hours, the infamous torturer was just another soul trying to keep the nightmares at bay, to find a little joy in gardening, to laugh at gossip, and maybe, just maybe, imagine retiring to a quiet life of anonymity and pies. because history may be a catalogue of grim inventions and unfortunate job descriptions, but it's also the story of resilience, stubborn hope, and the unstoppable urge to keep going, one awkward village festival at a time. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, warm, safe, and unbothered by medieval job hazards, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors. They survived cold stew, suspicious glances, and neighbours who definitely overshared. And because of them, you get to tuck in, close your eyes, and dream peaceful dreams in a world where the scariest thing lurking after dark is probably just a snoring pet. Good night. Sleep well. And remember, tomorrow's drama can wait until morning.